This is a video where I'm going to share something of how I'm using what I call a digital jotter to ensure that I'm getting interaction with my pupils whenever I'm doing a live lesson. Now, before I jump into the technology, I'm going to start not with the technology, but with the pedagogy, because you should always start with the why. You're always asking yourself the question that you would ask in any classroom setting: why am I doing what I'm trying to do with this? And of all the things I could say about the digital jotter, I thought it might be helpful to talk about this feedback loop. Now, we're used to, as teachers, giving feedback to students, whether that's feedback individually in the work or the whole class feedback. But what I'm going to suggest with this is that it's possible to see that more as a loop. So yes, teachers will feedback to the students, but that is based on what we get from them, the feedback we get from them, first of all, as they try to grapple with the material. How effectively are they assimilating it into their content? Or the content into their schemas. Now, that process of assimilation can sometimes be flawed, sometimes can be incomplete, and it's very important for us as teachers to get a real sense of how successful and how complete and how effective that is. So how do we do that? How do we get that information from our students? And then what do we do with that information? What's the feedback then? How do we in turn bring this back to the students to clarify some things or to address misconceptions, or indeed, if we've discovered that the content has been effectively assimilated, how do we consolidate that and make sure that the students don't learn, or the students do learn, sorry, definitely want them to learn. So that's the reason why I'm doing it. Let's then move on to the how I go about using, in this case, Google Slides to help deliver that goal. So in the first instance, how do we open Google Slides? Well, you go to the little grid at the top, you open up Slides, and then you'll open up a blank Slides like so. So what I will then want to do is to set up my slides to help me to turn this into digital jotter. So the first thing I'll do is set up a blank slide with this, and then a few of the basic things that I get out of the way. I'll want to put a little header at the top here, which has the pupil's name in there, and well, let's add a little bit of color. Why not? I'm a geography teacher. I'm contractually obliged to color things in. And what I can then do is to set up just a couple of simple text boxes within this. Here's one here, and I'll just put a box around it typically so that the pupils can see that it's there. And then I'll put something over here where I typically set this up for comment or feedback. I'll just type that in and then add a wee bit of color to that as well. There we go. Now, that's a basic slide. Very, very easy to set up. How do I turn this into the digital jotter? Oh, it's very easy too. Just come over here to the slide view, right click, duplicate. Now, I tend to like to do this in batches of 5 because the 5 times tables are dead easy, aren't they? So there are 5 slides. Select them all, right click, 10, 15, 20, 25, however many you need. And there is all of your collection of slides. So let's click onto the slide view. You can hit the negative button there just to see them all, and you are seeing them all there, and it's done. It's as simple as that. So I'll just put this in as test digital jotter, and I'm ready then to use that. All I need to do is to come over to the share button. By default, it's private. So I come to the share button and I'm going to change the link here. It's to anybody who has the link is an editor. I copy the link and that's ready to use. Now that then brings me to a second little idea that I'm finding to be very, very helpful with this. It's what I've called the learning log. So what I do with this is to set this up for my pupils in the week in advance, and each lesson, it basically becomes in a sense my planning document as well, although the planning is very, very it's reasonably summarized, as you can see here. It just gives them a little bit of an indication of what we're doing. So here's today's lesson, for instance. What I do is get them to come in here, and in the first instance, I'm asking them to put their initials in. It's a good way of me getting them to do the register, so I know who's arrived and who's in class. And whenever they come in here, their little icons will appear at the top, and I can see who's typing what. Now, I had this set up in advance. As the class is gathering, there you go, click into this slides, grab a slide for yourself, and complete it. Retrieval practice, no peeking. So what did I get them to do? It was this one here. Again, you can see this is set up with all the slides. It was a very simple process. I just put that in there as a background, and then to get them to be able to type on it, I just put in a series of text boxes like this. And what I asked them to do is to go in and, from memory, retrieval practice to see if they could recall the different methods and processes of erosion within the river. While they were doing that, I'm able to live monitor them. I'm able to go in and have a little bit of a look at the slide that they're working on at any stage, and I'm able to give them some feedback. Now, that's just very, very quick retrieval practice on the way in. You can imagine that something like this can be used as a digital jotter throughout a lesson. So if you want to intersperse the lessons with interactive activities, if you want to question the students on the way through and get them to write down something based on what you've taught, to see the extent to which they're picking these things up, to look for those misconceptions, etc., etc. In other words, the thing that you would be doing in classroom anyway, this is how you can do it. And it really is very, very simple, and the students can access that. Now, I just want to finish off by showing you a slightly higher level version of what I did with my Year 13 class today on this. And this was looking at the impacts of the El Nino, global winds and precipitation. Now, in the first instance, I put in this map as a backdrop. And what I wanted them to do really was to produce a digital poster. I had produced a video in advance for them to watch. And the idea behind this was that they were to go through to watch the video, to pause the video, and then to make notes on the content they were doing on the way through. And they could add more content in, they could put lines in, they could put shapes in, whatever it was they wanted. I want them to be creative with this. But the text boxes were in here for them to start off with. I'd made those semi-transparent so that you could see the writing but still see something underneath, and then just did the same thing to copy and paste that across so that I had the digital jotter for everybody. So what I want to do is to show you a little bit of an example of how I use that to give some feedback to my students. Let's jump in here and we'll see some of those in actions. So here is an example of some feedback I was able to get from Ben and then give to Ben. One of the impacts of the El Nino is that it tends to encourage tropical storm formation in the eastern part of the Pacific, and it tends to suppress it in the Atlantic. That's the general pattern. And we'd looked at one particular example of Cyclone Pam, which came down through the islands of Vanuatu. Now, what Ben did was jump straight into the detail. He jumped straight into the example without giving the context. Now, what allowed me to see was that he maybe hadn't picked up the context as clearly as I might have liked. So I'm able to come in here and to give him some feedback like this. I'm typing this to him as he is working on this live. I'm getting the feedback from him as to how he's getting on. I'm giving him the feedback based on that. Here's another example. This slide was meant to be about the global impact on, or the impact on global winds. Ethan did cover some stuff about the winds, but jumped into some information about the temperature here. So he was right about this, but he wasn't relevant. He was right, but not relevant. So I was able to give him some feedback on that and get him to change it. So those are some examples of the students that maybe hadn't picked it up so successfully. But of course, you hope that there are students that are slightly more exemplary than that can pick things up, because it's always great to be able to point to this as examples for other students. Thankfully, one of my students, Heather, was produced some absolutely outstanding work for this. So the very thing that the first student, Ben, didn't quite get, Heather absolutely nailed. There she is. The El Nino years encourage hurricanes to form over the Pacific due to the reversal of wind direction, which impacts water circulation in the tropics. Wow, what brilliant detail that she has got from the video. Now, here comes the example. For example, the 2015-16 El Nino year, March 2015, Cyclone Pam occurred in Vanuatu. So what I'm able to do is to say to Heather, yep, spot on, state the overall pattern, that's this box, and exemplify with reference to this box. So I'm able to sense that, right, okay, some of the students are getting it, which is good. That means that my explanation isn't completely off the wall. The video is actually useful. But not everybody is, which is exactly what you would expect. I mean, there's going to be variation in how the students pick this up. So what I was able to do in our plenary at the end was say, right, everybody jump back in here. And I shared my screen and I was able to say, look, look at the work that Heather's done. Some of you didn't quite do this, but here's how to go about doing it properly. And I was able to give that whole class feedback based on the work that the student had been doing. So back again to the why. We start with the why, we'll finish with it. Why do all of that in the first place? Why do that as a live streamed lesson when I had the pre-recorded video sitting and waiting? The reason for that was because it allowed me to get this feedback, for me to understand from the students how they're getting on, and for me then to give feedback both as individuals to them and as whole class at the end, to make sure that the process of assimilating into the schema was as clear and effective as possible. The technology, well, it just happens to be Google Slides in this case. It could be any other VLE that you're using. You'll find some kind of equivalent version to being able to do that. The technology is secondary. The technology is the servant. Yes, it is the enabler. But what drives this is the pedagogy, is having that clear educational goal and intent, just like you would have in a classroom, and then thinking, right, how can the technology help me to achieve that? So I hope that that has been of some help to you. Let's keep going with this, and let's keep sharing, and let's keep supporting each other. These are strange times, but isn't it great that we can help each other like this? So good luck to us all in the weeks and months ahead.